The first thing I'm going to ask you is to tell me about your father.
My father is an Afro-Métis guy, which means he has some indigenous blood in him. He grew up black in, we'll say black Nova Scotia, because Nova Scotia is probably the most segregated place in Canada. They have communities there that have all white communities, and the blacks were on the outside of the communities because they were doing domestic work, and rarely were you in town if you were black, especially at night. What are you doing here after dark? Boy, was what they used to say in those days. Of course, when my father's day, they called you colored, Negro, colored, then it became black in the 60s. That was our generation, so our generation was different. But my father was a military guy. One of my uncles was killed. I said, one of my uncles was hung by the government for murders. To this day, we don't think he did. And he was my grandfather's best friend, so my grandfather took off. He left his family and came to Toronto over the court proceedings and the stuff that happened at that time. So my family then was abandoned. My 14 kids, there was 14 kids at the time, and that was, my father was the oldest. So as the oldest, he had to put up man of the house and go to work. So he went to work on ships down in Halifax Harbor, because that was the biggest harbor at the time. And on one of the ships, the guy said, no niggers are going to be working on this ship as long as I'm here. Ended in a fight. Didn't work out for that guy. He got killed. My father went to jail for manslaughter for a couple of years. Came out, joined the army. Became a sergeant in the army. When he was in the army, traveling across Canada, training black troops during World War II, he met my mother in Sudbury, settled, and then after the army, he settled down in Sudbury. And then she became pregnant with me, and he moved to Toronto, into the Kensington Market area when I was 2 years old. So I grew up in the Kensington Market area. Because he was a military guy, there was an Army-Navy club position for him to manage. He got that position. So in my eyes growing up, I looked at he was a big tough guy too. So in my eyes, growing up looking at my black father in a black neighborhood, have being one of the only two business owners or business managers in that case. So he managed the Army-Navy Club. In the Kensington Market, there was a Jay's Barbershop, a black barbershop downtown. And that was the only other black business in the city. So when I grew up, I looked at my father as, he was a community leader, tough guy, pillar, didn't take any shit from the cops or anybody else. And so we felt protected by that father. Like he would step, rah, 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 what do you bother my sons for? So we felt that kind of protection from him. But here's the but. Because I grew up in the 60s, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, that was opposite than his thinking. His thinking was get along with the white man as best you could. Get the best job you can and live a comfortable life like that. Don't cause any ripples, don't cause any things, don't come up against them, don't argue with them, just do what you're supposed to do and get by. That was his philosophy. And our philosophy was like, screw him, we'll take it over. We're demanding our freedom, we're going to fight for our freedom. And that attitude in me caused me to join the Black Panther Party in 1971, which changed the direction of my life, because the Black Panther recruiter, with the head of the Baltimore Black Panther chapter, was crooked. And because he was crooked, he criminalized us in the application of revolution and the stuff that was civil rights movement at the time. My father said to me, I was 16 years old, so he said, why are you hanging around that 52-year-old man? And I said, because he does what you ain't doing. You were in the army, but you're in the white man's army. He's in the black man's army. Because my father kept saying, since we were kids, join the army, it'll make a man of you. Their soldiers say that, right? And we're like, screw you, because I didn't want to be him. I didn't want to be what I considered an Uncle Tom. I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be a revolutionary. I wanted to make a bigger difference, a bigger change. So there was this juxtaposition, this of philosophies between the two of us. We tried to get along. So when I was 15, just turning 16, I had a bunch of guns in the house. My mother found them, and my father went ape shit. Only one man in this house. What do you want all those guns for? Blah, blah, blah. So when I woke up the next morning, he said, I took the guns to the police station and gave them to them. If you want them, go ask them for them. So he kicked me out of the house, and a crew of us moved into an apartment building. We still went to school. We still went to the after-hour clubs at night, but I wasn't living at home now. Technically, I was on the streets, but I wasn't on the streets because we had our own apartments, right? So we're still cool. We had roof over our head. We had money coming in because we were hustling and stealing and stuff like that. So my father never condoned my criminal activity. He wasn't a thief. He didn't allow stolen goods into his house, that kind of stuff. Although I had uncles that were gangbangers, and they did. So there was the argument. The argument was, don't do what your uncles are doing. And in my mind is, I don't want to do what you're doing either. And what my uncles were doing was more entertaining, more fly, more hip, more happening. They had more girls in their cars. They had bigger and better stuff, right? Because they're hustling. So I went my uncle's route. My father stayed the pillar of the community. He's the only guy in North America, albeit a black guy, to wrestle a co-op project house off the government to create this co-op called Atkinson Co-op now. He's the only guy that did it. So he had this thing about him, about change, helping the community. Different than me. I was more angry, so revolution was the key, man. Pick up the gun, let's go to work, you know?